This video is brought to you by Sailrite. In this video, we're going to show you from beginning to end how to build a sail pack using one of Sailrite's sail pack kits. This video will go over the detailed steps of how to sew it up and how to make your very own sail pack for your sailboat. The Sailrite sail pack kits are a popular adaptation of a standard mainsail cover that is used in conjunction with lazy jacks to make dousing and covering a mainsail quick and easy. Simply drop the sail and zip the cover panel shut, the two halves of the cover attached below the foot with webbing straps and common sense fasteners. Angela from the Sailrite Loft is going to show us how it's done. But first, Matt Grant's going to go over how to take measurements to build your very own sail pack kit.
All right, we have our sail flaked on our boom, and now we just want to tie it up. So I'm just using my sail ties, and now we can get some measurements. We want to measure the highest point of the stack first, and the best way to do that is to use your soft tape measure and pass it under the foot of the sail above the boom, and then bring it around the top. And we want to come in here. We don't want to be super tight, but we don't want to be super loose either. And I'm getting about 60 here with the stack. So I would say we would be fine. If you want a tighter fit, go in the 60 range, which is what we're going to do. You could go all the way up to 64 or so. So I'd say 60 to 64 would be a comfortable range for this particular sail on this particular boat. We're going to use 60 because I always find tighter looks a little bit better for sail packs, and I don't like the fabric sides to get so high that they're flapping around a lot when the sail's up. All right, back here at the clew, we want to go about 18 inches forward of the clew corner, so roughly in this region. And then what I want to do is go under the sail again, sorry if you can't see me, at roughly the 18-inch position. And we're going to wrap our tape around here. And we are getting fairly snug. We're getting 22. I don't know if you can see that. So it looks like about 22 is where we are. I would say the range here would be anywhere between 22 and 26 or so. The one thing you want to keep in mind here at the back when you do these measurements is that the way we pattern this, we're patterning for this position. Obviously the amount of sailcloth diminishes rather greatly as we get to the end, but you don't want to end up with a situation where you have nothing back here at the back as well. So we typically don't want to find a situation where we're using a number less than about 20 for our calculation here. So 22 is definitely on the small end, and for your larger boats, you're gonna have a larger number than that. It all depends upon, because the way we do this is we're measuring up from this point, and then the slope intersects this line and it comes back. So it's gonna be slightly tighter at the back edge here. But again, there's not much material here. You'll see what that looks like when we get the cover done. Okay, now we're gonna get the length, which is essentially the foot length of the sail. And Angela's gonna measure it to the clew. I'm gonna bring it forward to the mast, and we're getting about 120 inches here, so 10 foot. It'd be wise to record your measurements as you go. So we had 60-inch circumference at the highest point, 22 inches at the clew, and 120 inches for our length. Those are the only three numbers we need from the boat to go pattern and construct our sail pack. We also need to come back out to the boat to check to make sure that the connection points for the two sides of the panel that will be sewn to the bottom of the two sides of the panel don't interfere with any of our slider slug positions in the boom. That's assuming that your boom is set up like this and you don't have a loose-footed sail.
With those calculations we took with the sail flaked on the boom, we can now use these calculations to determine what size to cut the fabric. Don't worry, we'll show those again shortly. Here are the calculations for our particular sail pack. We recommend drawing a rough sketch on paper of the sail pack on the fabric. Now we'll use those measurements and plug them into these calculations to determine the size of the fabric that needs to be cut for your particular sail pack. Using those measurements that Matt just took on our boat, here are the figures all calculated. Now we can take those calculations and mark the fabric to the correct size so we can cut it out. We're going to take the highest point measurement here at the edge of the fabric. For us it was 41 inches. Mark the fabric. Then we're going to measure down from that cut edge to our length of our sail plus the 6 inches, which has already been calculated in. And we're going to mark at that location as well. Ours is 126 inches. Now we're going to measure over 2 feet from that mark and place a mark there as well. This will be the B measurement. From that 2 foot in mark, we'll measure up for our B measurement and place a mark at that location. Believe it or not, those 4 marks on the fabric will determine the pattern for our sail pack. We'll take a length of string, create an eye, and then we're using an awl and putting it in the position at the forward edge of the sail pack. Then we run the string down the length of the sail pack fabric and position the string directly over the line that is line B. And then we'll place an awl a little bit past the edge of the sail pack. Now if you don't want to put holes in your table or floor, get some helpers and have them hold the string as you mark it. Then at that furthest mark, we'll create or strike a line that is perpendicular to the edge of the fabric all the way up. And then we'll strike a line down the length of the rope, and we're using a ruler there just to keep it nice and straight. We are using the soapstone pencil, which is highly recommended for dark fabrics because the soapstone pencil has the marks come off easily with water. Then we need to mark the fabric. This is the starboard outside, so we marked it south. Then simply remove the string, and we'll take a metal ruler underneath the fabric to prevent damage to the tabletop when we use the Sailrite edge hot knife to cut the fabric out. Using a hot knife like this will help to prevent the fabric from unraveling. Highly recommended. If you don't have a professional hot knife like the Sailrite edge, you can use a wood burning tool or a soldering gun. Now we'll take that fabric we just cut out with a hot knife and we'll lay it on top of the fabric on the other side, rolling it around so that it nests nicely and utilizes as much fabric as possible. There is no right or wrong side of this umbrella marine grade fabric, so don't worry about that. If your sail pack is fairly large, you may have to nest it a little bit further down the length of the fabric. We're using a 60-inch width umbrella fabric, and if your forward edge is greater than 60 inches, an additional wedge panel will need to be cut and sewn to the top of both panels using a semi-flat felled seam. We'll not be showing that in this video. All we have to do is strike lines down the edge of the fabric that was cut out onto the fabric underneath. We're using the soapstone pencil again that's available from Sailrite. The fabric underneath is our port side panel, so we're going to turn the fabric over and mark P-O-U-T, port outside. Now we'll take off the fabric that we used as a pattern and cut it out with the Sailrite edge hot knife again, using a ruler on the bottom side to prevent damage to the tabletop. Rotate the fabric so we're working on the angled edge, which is the top edge, and we'll mark lines on the inside of the fabric 13 inches down from that angled edge. Remember to always hold your ruler perpendicular to the cut edge. Once the fabric has been marked, we'll then strike a line on top of those marks 13 inches down from the angled edge. We'll use a long ruler here to do this. Be sure to follow that same procedure, marking down 13 inches from the curved edge or top edge of the fabric on the second panel as well. Now we'll fold the fabric into that 13-inch line and we'll create a crease, making sure that the fabric edge is lined up with the 13-inch line that we struck down on the fabric. We're folding the fabric in towards the inside of the fabric, not the outside of the fabric. Once that's done at the clew end, we'll use a T-square and line it up with the bottom edge of the cover and strike a line right where the corner of that fold starts, and we'll be cutting that excess off. Along the forward edge where the fold overlaps the main body, we'll strike a line there, and we'll also be cutting that off as well. We're going to use the Sailrite edge hot knife and cut here at the trailing edge, and we'll also do that same procedure at the forward edge. It's not uncommon when cutting sunbrella fabric, if you cut multiple layers, that you may have to peel it apart because it seems to bond to itself. Once it's been cut, you'll notice that edge is not straight. That is normal. Now here at the forward edge, we'll cut off the excess that hangs over that edge as well, using that Sailrite edge hot knife again. When that edge is unfolded, it too is not straight. That is normal. Next, we're going to take a Dacron fabric. This is a 4-ounce Dacron sailcloth fabric, and we're going to cut a 5 by 6 inch piece of fabric from it. The weight of the Dacron sailcloth is not that critical. We cut 2 of the 5-inch by 6-inch pieces because we need to put them on both sides of our sail pack. We folded it in half along the long side, and we'll apply double-sided tape to the patch so that we can baste it in place on top of our sunbrella fabric. We've applied the double-sided tape on 3 sides of this Dacron patch, peel off the transfer paper, revealing the glue, and then we'll baste it on top of our canvas so that the fold is centered at that V junction, right on top of that fold that we created in the sunbrella canvas. Flip the canvas over, and you notice there's some Dacron that is hanging over the V junction in the canvas, and we'll cut that with scissors. There's no reason to use a hot knife because the Dacron does not unravel. Alright, do that to the second panel as well. We'll not be showing that. This patch has been installed to the inside surface of our sail pack. Now we'll take it to the sewing machine and we'll sew a straight stitch very close to the raw edge of the Dacron, about an 1/8 inch or less to the edge. As we come to the corner, we'll bury our needle, lift our foot, rotate the fabric around, lower our foot, and continue to sew. Next corner, same procedure. Sew all the way to the end and reverse. No reason to sew the raw edge because there'll be a hem there installed later on. So we'll leave that unsewn. Here we'll do some reversing to lock our stitch in place. Now do that to the second panel as well. We're marking with a pencil a 3/4 inch easing slit into the center of the V so a hem can be folded flat across the entire aft edge. We'll then measure and mark a line on the inside of each panel 1.5 inches inside the aft edge. We'll then strike some straight lines down the marks we made that are 1.5 inches from the edge of the fabric, and then we'll fold the fabric to create the hem. Prior to folding the fabric to that line, we'll apply the double-sided tape for canvas available from Sailrite. Great stuff, excellent for sunbrella fabric. We're going to cut the double-sided tape at that slit and start it here on the other side of the V. Peel off the transfer paper, revealing the glue, and then we'll fold it to that line we struck on the fabric. Next, we'll take it to the sewing machine and sew a straight stitch down the length of the aft side. We'll do some reversing at the beginning and the end to lock our stitch in place. Let's talk a little bit about thread. Each of the sail pack kits come with V92 polyester thread. However, we're using Tanara thread. It is a lifetime guaranteed thread here in this video because it never rots. V92 polyester thread is less expensive, easier to sew with, and is UV resistant, but will rot in high UV concentrated areas. That's why we typically use Tanara for every canvas job we sew at the Sailrite loft. We'll follow that same procedure for the second panel, doing the same thing. Let's move on. Next, we'll be creating a hem along the forward edge, so we'll measure and mark a line on the inside of each panel 1.5 inches inside the forward edge. Notice that we're always marking the fabric with the ruler perpendicular to the raw edge of the fabric. That's important. We'll then strike a line on top of those marks, creating a line that can be followed when we create our hem. We'll apply double-sided tape to that forward edge, and then we'll fold the fabric back to that line, creating a single hem here. And notice that when we get to the part of the fabric where the fabric takes a curve or a different angle, we have to leave a wrinkle in the fabric at that position. That is completely acceptable. We'll then take this over to the sewing machine and sew that hem in place just as we did for the aft end. This is the forward edge, and the fabric is folded to the inside of the cover. We'll do that to this panel, and we'll also do it to the second panel, following the same procedure. Let's move on. Now we're going to create batten pockets. We'll refold the top edge of each panel down to the 13-inch line that we struck on the inside of the panel. We're going to use a putty knife or a tucking tool in this situation to create a good crease along that long edge. We'll measure down from the folded edge 2 inches and strike lines or marks at those locations, holding the ruler perpendicular to the folded edge. And then we're going to strike a line down the length of the fabric 2 inches down from that folded edge. We'll do the same procedure to the second panel as well. Now we're going to take this panel to the sewing machine, and we're going to use the deluxe magnetic guide and position it so that we can sew a stitch an 1/8 inch from the folded edge. This is a row of straight stitches that must be positioned an 1/8 inch from the folded edge. Don't go any deeper than that. That's why we're using the deluxe magnetic guide here. And we'll sew all the way to the other end, reversing there to lock our stitch in place. Now we're going to move the magnetic guide so that we can sew 2 inches from the folded edge. So we positioned it here on top of the line we struck onto the fabric, and we'll sew down its length as well. This is 2 inches from the folded edge on top of that line that we struck down. If you don't have the deluxe magnetic guide, you can use masking tape on the bed of your sewing machine, or just simply follow the line that you struck onto the fabric. We'll sew all the way through the Dacron patch on the aft end, reverse there at the edge. Next, we'll close the aft end of the 2-inch pocket with several rows of straight stitches. This will keep the batten, or PVC pipe, depending on which one you use, in the pocket and keep it from coming out of the aft end of our sail pack. Do that to the second panel as well. We'll not be showing that. Next, we're going to be installing a zipper along the zipper closure that we just created. We're going to flip the fabric so the inside is facing up. Measure and mark a line 2 inches from the flap edge all along the length. We'll then use basting tape and baste it all along the long edge on the inside of that fabric, and then we're going to fold the fabric down to that line that we just struck on the fabric, creating a 1-inch hem. If you order the Sail Pack kit from Sailrite, many of the items shown in this video are included. At the end of this video, there'll be a materials list that shows what items are included and what items are not. We're going to use that tuck tool, or you could use a putty knife just to make sure that the hem stays in place and we create a good crease along that edge. This is not necessarily needed, but it's not a bad idea to keep everything in place. Now we'll do that same procedure to the second panel as well. We're going to cut our zipper. This is a continuous length number 10 YKK zipper, approximately 9 to 12 inches longer than the actual length of the sail cover or sail pack. We're applying the double-sided tape to the edge of the zipper. It doesn't matter which side of the zipper you use, just be sure to apply the double-sided tape to the same side, whichever side you choose, and make sure the double-sided tape is as far to the edge as possible. We'll separate the teeth, and we're going to sew a stop here on the end of the zipper. And we're going to use a 1-inch webbing to do this. So we'll fold it around one side of the teeth as shown here in the video, and then we'll sew it in place. First, we're going to cut that webbing to size using that Sailrite edge hot knife again. Great hot knife, heats up in a few seconds and cools down in about a minute. We're going to cut 2 strips of webbing the same size, and that way we can use it for both sides of the zipper. We're going to peel back some of the double-sided tape so that we can fold that webbing over the zipper and then put that double-sided tape back over the webbing when we're done. We'll apply double-sided tape to the webbing as well, which is a very helpful tool. Double-sided tape is highly recommended for almost any canvas project. It makes sewing a lot more easy and keeps everything in place when you take it to the sewing machine to sew. The double-sided tape that Sailrite sells is especially made for sunbrella canvas. It does not yellow in the sun, and it sticks very well. There are very few glues that stick well to sunbrella, but this double-sided tape does stick well. You do not want so much excessive glue that it actually seeps out after it's been applied in the sun. So be sure to order the double-sided tape from Sailrite. We'll peel off the double-sided tape on the zipper and then baste it in place following the raw edge that has been folded. So the zipper is well inside the folded edge, as you see here in the video. So she's matching up the flange of the zipper, the edge of the flange, to the raw edge of the canvas that has been folded to create the 1-inch hem. You'll notice we have not sewn it yet. After the zipper's been applied, we're going to cut it to more exact size. This is about 12 inches longer than the cover, which is what we recommend. And we'll probably be cutting it shorter later on, but for now this will work. We're going to cut the double-sided tape right at the edge of the cover and peel off the extra. We don't need that, so we're going to cut it and peel it off completely. And now we'll separate the teeth all the way, and we'll use that second half of the zipper on the other cover following that same procedure. Notice that we have not sewn that webbing on the end. We'll do that as we sew the zipper to the cover. Be sure you fold the tail down under so you don't sew through that. We only want to sew through that 1-inch hem, and we want to sew the zipper on at the same time. So we'll have one stitch that secures the hem and the zipper and the webbing at the opposite end. We'll start here at the aft edge, reverse a little bit at the beginning, and sew all the way down the length of the zipper. It is important to be sure the stitch is far enough away from the teeth that you can operate the slider in a later step. Here we're using the Sailrite 111, and we're just using that foot on the right side to keep the stitch approximately in the halfway location of the flange. Here at the forward edge, we'll sew right through that webbing that is a stop for the slider, and reverse over top of that webbing. So we did it all in one step, one process. And we'll do that same thing to the other side. We did not show that, but here they are, all sewn together with the zippers installed. Now we have the two covers on top of each other so the inside surfaces are facing each other. We'll match up the aft edge so that they are even, and the zippers are flush with each other, and we'll start the slider onto the end of the zipper. Be sure the slider puller is facing the right direction so that it will be up, and then start the fat side of the zipper slider onto the zippers so that the two sides are even, and zip it in just as you see here in the video. And we're going to zip it all the way through and be sure that our canvas is matched up. If it's not, pull off the slider and restart it so that the canvas is exactly flush or even. And it looks pretty good here. It's a little bit off, but that's probably normal, so we don't need to remove the slider. The slider has been installed appropriately. On the aft edge, we're going to use a 2-inch piece of polyester or nylon webbing, and we're going to fold it on the end of the zipper. This is after the slider's been installed, so this is approximately 2 by 2 when it's folded in half. So it's approximately a 2-inch by 4-inch as it's cut. We're going to apply double-sided tape to it and then fold it over the end of the zipper. This will keep the slider from coming off and also create a good end stop that is nice and rugged. If you've chosen to install a zipper slider control line, you may not want to install this webbing yet. In a later step, we'll be having to remove this webbing and reposition it. So you may want to hold off if you've chosen, which is totally completely optional, to use a zipper slider control line. That's coming up later on in this video. You'll notice we're sewing this webbing on with a box X stitch. Being careful to not deflect the needle when we're going through the teeth of the zipper. This is overkill, but it is the probably most common way to install any type of webbing on any kind of fabric application to use a box X stitch. You could probably just sew over the folded raw edge and do some reversing there, and that would accomplish the same goal. But we wanted to show the entire process here of creating a box X stitch to sew this webbing in place. Now we're going to be concentrating on the bottom hem. We're going to flip the panel so the inside surface is facing up. So both panels will show the inside surface. And we're going to mark on the bottom edge for a hem. We'll measure and mark a line on the inside of each panel 2.5 inches above the bottom edge. We'll then apply basting tape along the inside of each edge and fold up to the marked line that we're striking on the fabric now. Once that's basted in place, we'll apply a second line of basting tape along the folded edge and fold up again to create a double hem. That's 3 layers of fabric along the entire bottom length of the panels. Do that to both of them. We'll sew a row of straight stitches along the folded edge of the hem and a second row along the inside edge of the hem. We're using the Deluxe Magnetic Guide here to help guide our stitches to keep them nice and straight. As we come to the other end, we'll reverse to lock the stitch in place. Now we'll reposition the Deluxe Magnetic Guide so that we can sew on the upper or inner part of that hem, approximately 1/8 inch from the folded edge. Reverse at the beginning and also at the end. We'll be using zippers to attach the Mast boot. So now we're going to install a finished zipper here, whereas we installed a continuous zipper along the top. So this finished zipper will be sewn on to the forward edge of our panels. Baste one side of the zipper directly on top of the 3/4 inch hem on the inside of the panel so that the zipper tape is flush with the raw edge of the hem. The starting box is up against the underside of the pocket and the zipper slider pull tab is down against the hem. So Angela peels off the double-sided tape. It's not a bad idea to apply double-sided tape on both sides of the zipper. That way you don't get confused in a later step when you have to apply the other side to the actual Mast boot portion. So you may want to apply the double-sided tape to both sides of the zipper. That's something we did not do here in the video. As we turn the cover over to look at the outside surface, you'll see that the zipper teeth are basically buried behind the flap of fabric to protect them from the sun. That's perfect. We'll sew a row of straight stitches down the center of the zipper tape and reverse over the stitches at the end to lock them in place. Since we sewed down that hem earlier, which needs to be done, you'll see 2 stitches on the outside surface, but they still look great. Angela is marking the zipper so that she knows where to cut it on both sides with a pencil here so that it's flush with the bottom edge of the actual cover. We'll pull the slider up so we don't cut that off, and we'll cut the zipper to that length on both sides. To create a slider stop, we're going to use the stainless steel top stops, and we're going to crimp them over the end teeth of the zipper. Notice that we're installing it on the 3rd tooth up. Typically we install them 1 to 2 teeth up from the end, not the bottom tooth, as it is the weaker tooth. And we're using needle nose pliers to crimp the stainless steel top stop in place. We'll do that to both sides, and that creates a great stop. We'll be using webbing lock straps, which are sewn to one side of the cover and fastened to the other side using common sense twist lock fasteners. If you have a loose-footed sail or a sail without slugs, there are many alternatives to using this system, and those are available in the written instructions that come with the Sail Pack kit or can be purchased separately. Webbing lock straps will need to be placed at the forward and aft ends of the sail pack, just far enough from the ends to avoid the hardware at the tack and the clew, and every 18 to 33 inches in between. Actual spacing will vary due to the cover length and the number of fasteners. I personally recommend that fasteners be placed about every 12 inches. That's my personal preference, and I believe it results in a better sail pack. If you choose to install them every 12 inches, you'll need to order more webbing and more common sense twist fasteners. The kit will not come with enough.
This is our crude drawing of what we just did, mark on the foot edge of the sail panel, or sail pack panel. So we came back 4 inches for our starting mark, and then we added 19 inches to each, so 23, 42, 61, and so on all the way back to the cover. And the spacing here is really not super critical. In other words, they don't have to be a consistent 19 inches. No one would notice it if they were if they varied a few inches. So what we're going to do now is we're coming out to the boat, and we're going to take a tape measure and start at the front, and we're going to look at this spacing. What happens at 4, what happens at 23 and 42, and so on. Make sure we don't have any slugs in the way. And we're also going to make sure that these two end points won't interfere with any hardware on our boom. Okay, so Angela's helping me by recording some information for me behind me here. And you notice we had our first mark at 4 inches, which would probably work because the panel's going to stop roughly here right at the back side of the mast. But I prefer to stay away from this area. So I'm going to have her change that first measurement to 6 inches. And Angela, what was our second measurement? 23 inches. You notice 23 inches is a little too close to this slug, and I have my out haul position hard, or out hard right now. So we're going to change that one to 22. Next one?
42.
42. So we're going to look at 42 here. 42 is clear. Next one?
61.
61 is clear.
80.
Okay. Now we're getting to your area there. 80 is clear. Okay, what have we got?
99. No.
So we're clear?
Clear.
So 99's clear.
And 118.
And 118, that's going to take us, that's right at the clew. We don't want that there. And I want to go slightly in front of it. So what would that be? We want to be fairly close to that slug.
Right here?
Yep.
116.
116? Let's go 116. She's recorded those new numbers. It looks like we had to move 3. And we'll fix those on our actual fabric, and we're ready to go.
Here we brought the fabric back into the loft, and we're going to reposition those 3 locations for our sail pack so that they do not conflict with any of the slugs or other hardware. So Angela's just confirming each one of the measurements and remarking the fabric. To create a lock strap, cut a 5 3/4 inch long piece of 2-inch webbing for each lock strap position. Fold one end of the strap so that it is 2 inches from the opposite end, and sew it in place with a row of straight stitches along the edge and a second row of stitches within an 1/8 inch of the fold, as shown here in the video. We'll be installing a common sense eyelet in the top center of the fold portion of webbing. Mark the location of each prong with a pencil and cut a small slit at each mark using a utility knife. You'll notice that we're cutting slightly inside the pencil mark as that's where the actual leg rests. And we're going to use this utility knife and roughly cut the oval for the center of the eyelet as well. Using a very sharp utility knife is extremely important. It is not easy to cut the webbing if you use a dull one. If you'd like, you can purchase, or you may have in your possession, the common sense hole punch that's available from Sailrite, where you just hit it with a hammer and it creates the 4 slits and the oval in the center all in one blow, or multiple blows. we're going to remove the R blade that is on the Sailrite edge hot knife, and we're going to install the HSO blade, which is better for small holes. The HSO blade is not included with the edge hot knife. It is sold separately. We'll clean up that oval hole with this HSO blade installed in the Sailrite edge hot knife. You could use a wood burning tool or a soldering gun to do that as well. And now we'll push the prongs of the eyelet through the 4 slits, install the washer to the back side, and bend the prongs over the washer. To bend the prongs, you can use the edge of a blunt tool or pliers. Repeat these steps for all the lock straps that are required for your sail pack. To attach the lock strap to the cover, we're going to be using the double-sided tape and basting it to the underside. Notice the eyelet is facing up, and we're just lining them all up and applying the double-sided tape so that we can keep one of those lock straps at the appropriate position and sew them in place on our cover. Position the finished lock strap using the marks and position them over the double hem on the inside of the port cover panel with the backing plate facing up, and baste them in place. Next, we'll sew them directly over both existing hem lines. Reverse or bar tack at the beginning and end of each stitch row to lock them in place securely. Now we'll lay the 2 covers on top of themselves so the inside surfaces are facing each other, and Angela's going to fold that lock strap that we just created over top of the starboard panel and mark its position with the soapstone pencil. She's even going to mark the oval in the center of the eyelet. Next, we'll take the premium cutting block that's available from Sailrite and position it between the 2 panels. We've marked the hole locations for the stud, and we're now using the 1/8 inch hole cutter to cut holes for each one of the buttons. If you don't have the 1/8 inch hole cutter, you can cut a small X with a razor blade. Now position the button through the fabric from the underside and use the snap installation tool and a hammer to roll the barrel of the button over the twist lock stud base, as shown here in the video. If the sliding barrel on the snap installation tool gets in the way of the stud, you can remove the barrel with pliers. Here we did not need to, and there the twist lock stud is now installed. Now simply repeat that procedure at each one of the webbing lock strap positions. To install a D-ring at the aft corner, we're going to take some webbing and we're going to cut 2 5-inch lengths of 1-inch webbing to size with the Sailrite edge hot knife. Next, we'll fold the webbing in half and position the folded edge flush with the bottom edge over the double hem on the inside of the aft corner of each of the panels. We'll sew directly over both existing hem lines, doing a bar tack at the beginning and end of each stitch row to lock it in place. Now slide the top unattached webbing leg through the 1-inch D-ring and sew that leg down against the other webbing leg through the cover to lock the ring in place between the webbing. The additional pads and the attachment point helps to reduce cover abrasion as the D-ring rubs up against the webbing rather than the cover. Do this on both panels. Using a hot knife, cut 4 6-inch long strips of 1-inch webbing, which we've already done. Fold the webbing in half and sew to the top of the bottom pocket at the aft end of each cover panel over the existing stitches on the inside of each panel. We'll start with the lower stitch. Because we're going to be installing a fairly large 3/4 inch Schedule 40 PVC in here, notice that we create a slight bump in the webbing. In other words, the webbing is not sitting flat against the cover. I recommend doing this because it makes it easier to insert the batten or PVC tube in a later step. We'll do that to both sides here at the aft edge. Here at the forward edge, we'll follow that same procedure again. Fold the webbing in half and position it at the forward edge over the existing stitches on the inside of each panel. Because this is where the batten or PVC pipe will be installed, be sure to push the webbing back so it creates a slight bubble. It's not laying flat against the cover because we want the batten or PVC to be able to be pushed in easily. This webbing will be used with a strap eye that's been installed on your mast about 10 inches above the sail pack, and you can rig shock cord to help hold the cover up along the mast. The webbing loop at the aft edge, you can use a topping lift if you have that available to help hold it up there as well.
We're back out at the boat, and what we want to talk about now are the lazy jacks. Lazy jacks are essentially cascading lines that come down on either side of the sail and act as a passageway for when the sail falls to keep the sail from falling outside of the boom area, if you will. The normal approach to a lazy jack, and this boat already has a Harken system installed, so you can see there are a couple of wires that are attached at the mast, roughly 70% up the mast. And that position's not super critical, just roughly 70% of the mast height. And these wires, in our case, terminate with a very small block. So there are two of those wires. Here's one, and the other one's floating over here. So one's for the port side and one's for the starboard side of the mast. Now, there are lots of ways to set up lazy jacks, but in general, the way this works is that you have a wire coming high from the mast that terminates in a block, and then you would have a line that connects to the boom, and I'm just going to talk about one side at a time. Both sides are done the same way. Have a line that connects to the boom, and then it goes up to the block, and then it comes back down into about this area, and then there's either another block or some type of an eye where we can run yet another leg. So we would have one leg come to the boom here, come up through this loop up here, and then the other leg would come down to the boom there. So essentially we're creating a multi-legged containment system on each the port and the starboard side of the boom. And that's what your typical lazy jack system looks like. The difference between the typical arrangement and what we do for a sail pack is that instead of connecting those legs to the boom, we connect those legs to the top of the sail pack panels. And we want to do that in roughly even intervals. If anything, err to the side of having them back further as opposed to further forward. But the positioning isn't really that critical. So if we have our sail pack, and in this particular case for a boom this length, and we will show a chart that shows you how to determine how many legs you need based upon the size of your boom. But for a 10-foot boom like this, we're going to have basically 3 legs. So we have to take the top of our sail pack, divide it by 4 sections to create 3 attachment points at the top for the 3 legs that will be used on this particular lazy jack system. And the next thing we're going to do is show you how to connect those to the top of the sail pack. But before we do that, I want to just discuss a couple of differences in lazy jack systems. I mentioned before that ours is statically fixed at the mast. It's not uncommon to have a block at the mast and run the line down the mast to a cleat so that you have adjustability in your lazy jack system here at the mast. If you don't have that, another alternative is to do the stationary arrangement like we have here, and then to put your adjustments using something like monster rope ties at each of the connection points on the sail pack. And I think that's what we'll do in this case. You could also hard tie them to the proper length, but then you lose that adjustability factor. So we're gonna do some unique things here. The point is, lazy jack system's a pretty simple concept. There are a number of ways to do it, and it's up to you to figure out what's the best arrangement for your boat. Use our our approach is a simple example.
You may use the chart to determine the number of lazy jack lines that will attach to your sail pack. The chart shows for a 12-foot boom that you can use 2 lines, but we prefer more for better support of the pack, so we are going to use 3 lines for our 10-foot length. We'll start measuring from the front. We're going to measure every 31 inches, and we're measuring at the top of the sail pack. For each one of those openings that will allow for the lazy jack lines to come through the cover, we need to cut 2 3-inch long strips of 1-inch webbing. We've cut those already with the Sailrite edge hot knife. Now we're marking both panels of fabric in the same location across from each other. Our sail pack has 3 openings on each side. That's 6 total. 6 times 2 is 12. We need to apply double-sided tape to each one of those webbing links. At each one of the points, place 1 strip of webbing on the underside of the zipper plaque as close as possible to the batten pocket and baste it in place. These webbing strips will not be visible because they're on the inside of the cover. One is on the actual plaque that the zipper is sewn to, and the other one is directly under it, as close to that seam line as possible. Now we're going to sew around the perimeter of the webbing. This webbing is used as a reinforcing patch on the back side to allow the lazy jack lines to come through the cover. You notice here how she stitches very close to the edge, then she moves and stitches approximately 1/8 inch from the first stitch. She's going to again sew very close to the edge, then she's going to move her stitch in a little bit towards the center, approximately 1/8 inch from the first stitch. So there's a lot of sewing involved in these, and it's not as pretty on the underside, but it will help to reinforce the opening that will cut through the fabric and through the webbing with the hot knife in a later step. Be sure you do not sew that tail on the underside, which she just showed. You want to only sew through the cover, and we'll do that to the second strip of webbing as well. We're going to speed the video up here because the process is exactly the same. So we're going to show it in double time. Now we'll trim all of the trailing threads from both this side and the top side, and then we'll place it back in the sewing machine again and sew the short ends as well. Here's what it looks like on the outside surface. Not bad. We're going to sew twice on each of the short ends, just as we did on the long ends. After we're done, we're going to trim our threads, and we're going to take out any excess stitches that went over our opposite stitch line to make it look a little bit more pleasing. We did quite a bit of reversing, so everything should be held in place well. Now we'll do that at each one of the webbing locations. There are 12 locations on our sail pack. When we're done, we're going to take the Sailrite edge hot knife and cut a slit through both the umbrella canvas and also the webbing on the underside. We have a ruler on the underside to help prevent damage to the tabletop. And be sure you don't cut through anything except for the canvas and the webbing. Angela prefers to put the slit with the hot knife as close to the seam line as possible. However, it can be placed in the center of the webbing if you choose. And take your time doing this. If you have the HSO blade or a wood burning tool or a soldering gun, you may want to use that, as the R blade shown here is a little bit on the big side. We just need the slit large enough that we can have the rope pass through, so don't make it too large. We'll repeat this procedure for every one of the 12 slits that we have to make. There's what it looks like from the underside. In the kit, there are 2 Sailrite logos included. We suggest you attach them onto each side of the sail pack and then sew them in position. They are an adhesive logo, but they do not stick for long unless they're sewn into position. Show the world that you did it yourself by using the Sailrite logo. Angela's going to place the second logo over top of the one she already basted in place, and then she's going to pull the cover over the top of that so that it's positioned in the exact same spot. That's really not necessary, but she's very picky. There we go. Now all we have to do is sew them in place. To sew the logo in place, we'll just start at one of the edges or the sides, reverse the stitching a little bit at the beginning, and sew all around the perimeter. Notice how Angela does it. She will keep her needle buried as she turns the fabric and rotates it around to sew the logo in position. And then when you get to where you began, just reverse to lock your stitch in place and you are done. We'll be using a 3/4 inch Schedule 40 PVC pipe that you can purchase at a hardware store. You could also use stiff round fiberglass battens, and they can be an alternative to the PVC pipe. Typically they're hard to ship. That's the one downfall of using the stiff round fiberglass battens. There are other choices as well. Using the PVC, you can pick that up at a hardware store, and we do discuss how to extend the length in our written instructions that are included with each of the kits or sold separately through our website or over the phone.
All right, we brought our sail pack panels out to the boat because we need to measure for the mast boot, which is the piece that will go around the front of the mast for windage purposes. And what we're going to do then, Tanner, is let's lay this over the sail. And the panels are connected, of course, because the zipper's connected at the back end since we use the standard assembly approach. And Tanner, let's go ahead and start the zipper. Okay, perfect. And that'll hold it over our sail for the time being. Now let's go ahead and snap it around the bottom, and we'll check our fit, make sure everything's good. Now this doesn't go around the underside of the boom, Tanner, this goes under the foot of the sail. So you pass the tabs under the foot of the sail and then connect. All right, we are attached underneath the sail and above the boom, and our sail cover is positioned where it should be, right behind the mast. And now we could actually rig up the lazy jacks, but and maybe we should, just so we can see how that works. So Tanner, come up here for a second. Grab those lines for me right there. All right, so we have the slits that we put in the cover for the passage of our line. And since these haven't been used, they're a little tight right now, so I'm going to open the cover so I can get in here. And pass the line through the slit, the reinforced slit, and then I'm going to bring it up through the reinforced slit on the inside here. And for now, we'll just tie it somewhat loosely. Okay. And we can zip this shut. And then Tanner, I need you to take this up to the block on the port side of the boat. Make sure those aren't twisted. Okay. All right, and this will come back, and this will be, we'll tie a loop in the end of this. Since we've got a small boat here, we don't need a block really here. And this will just simply pass through. So we're using this as a connection point, and then we're going to tie to the forward position. So we need to loosen this. And we'll be adjusting all of this later, so for now we're just some basic mounts. Okay. All right, and then basically we will be adjusting this to hold our sail pack up, as you can see how that's going to work. And we need to do the same thing on the other side, on the starboard side, and then we'll be ready to go. And I think I'm going to skip showing that right now. Instead, what we're going to do, and I did notice I forgot to remove the sail straps too. Those obviously should be removed when we're done here, because I won't be able to pull off the sail, which is what this is intended for, unless we have those sail ties removed. But now we can do what we need to do for the next step of sewing, which is to sew the mast boot. Okay, we want to take somewhat of a loose measurement here from about the widest position. So it's about midway in most cases. And what we're getting is if we go loose, 13.5 inches. And I think we want to go 13.5 makes sense for the mast boot. So put on the width, put 13.5 inches. And then for the height, we measure from under the sleeve pocket, and we measure straight down to where the zipper terminates. And we could do this at the table too, but here it looks like we need 20.
The height measurement will be the exact same size as the zipper that's awaiting to be installed on the mast boot.
And our height. And that's really all we need in the way of measurements. The reason we build the cover in this capacity is that we really don't have to take it off at this point. We can go back and just simply remove these half zippers and take them back to our sewing room, and we're ready to create the mast boot, and then we can finish up the lazy jack system. So we're ready to go.
Out of the Sunbrella fabric, we're going to make a rectangle that is the width and height measurement plus 2 inches on each one of those. So 2 inches plus the width and 2 inches plus the height. Then we'll cut it out with the Sailrite edge hot knife. Then we'll cut a Dacron sailcloth liner that'll be used for reinforcing and also chafe protection that is 2 inches less, which are actually the same measurements we took on the boat. So this is 2 inches smaller on the width and the height than the Sunbrella panel we just made. We'll baste around the perimeter of the Sunbrella fabric using the basting tape, and then we'll baste the center of the Dacron sailcloth material as well, so that we can baste everything in place prior to sewing. So now we'll baste the Dacron sailcloth fabric that is 2 inches smaller around the perimeter, right in the center of the Sunbrella fabric that's underneath. Once the Dacron is held in place, then we'll peel off the transfer paper on the Sunbrella fabric and fold it over to create a 1-inch hem, and we'll baste that in place. We'll fold all 4 edges so they're basted in place over top of the Dacron. The reason the Dacron is placed on the inside is for chafe protection. Next, sew a row of straight stitches along the top and bottom hems. Do not sew the starboard and port hems yet, the long hems. They will be sewn when the zipper is installed. Only the short ends. Now, if you didn't place double-sided tape on the zippers, back when we put the zippers on both panels here, you'll have to go back to the boat and confirm that the starter box and the starter post are on the correct side of the mast boot. So here you can see we're checking that over on the boat. Now we're going to place our double-sided tape on the zippers. Had we done that previously, we wouldn't have to worry about that. The starter box and the starter post are always at the top, so they will be always directly across from each other. We'll peel off the transfer paper on the zipper, or the double-sided tape I should say, and we'll baste the zipper so that it is flush with the edge of the Sunbrella, the raw edge of the Sunbrella. So the flange is even with that raw edge. And we'll do that to the opposite side as well. This side will have the starter post of the zipper. Angela will move the slider down from the starter box so she can start sewing right there at the end. Take it to the sewing machine and run a row of straight stitches just as we did with any of the other zippers that we installed. Reversing at the beginning and all the way to the other end. When she reaches the slider, watch what she does. She'll stop short of the slider, bury her needle, lift her foot, and pull the slider past the foot. By burying the needle like this, we won't lose our position. This is a little bit stubborn. She got a little bit close to the slider, but she'll get it done. Just have to force it. There we go. Now we lower the foot and continue sewing all the way to the other end. We'll do that to the other side as well.
All right, we have our sail pack panel on with the lazy jack lines adjusted where we want them. And the way we did that is you raise the sail so that the sail has the boom at its natural angle. And then you want to adjust the lines so that the PVC pipe or the batten in the top of the sail pack is taut. And in our case, we've used a monster rope tie here on a smaller boat so that we have easy adjustment and an easy way to disengage the system. But you could just as easily tie it. The nice thing about lazy jacks with a sail pack is that theoretically they will act as a topping lift for the boom when we drop the sail. So if we drop the sail now, we're going to get more tension on the sail pack panels, and everything should be adjusted properly. So Zach, go ahead and drop our halyard. So our sail drops, we just stuff it down into the pack.
Now all you need to do is zip it shut. Here we're using the optional zipper slider control line. We have instructions for this also included in this video and also in the written instructions. We're going to go over that option next.
On a lot of boats, the boom is so long and so high, and even on this smaller boat, it's hard to get to the back end. We've attached a block, a small block with a shackle here. And what we're going to do basically is create almost like a clothesline loop where we run the line through the block, and we're going to attach one end of this line to our zipper slider. And we're just going to tie that there. And then the other end of this line is going to go all the way down to a block at the mast, and we'll go down there and see what that looks like.
Using pop rivets and a strap eye from Sailrite, we're installing this block just an inch or so above the sail pack. This is what we'll run the line through.
This is going to be the line that runs outside the port side of the cover, and it's actually just going to ride on the outside of the lazy jack, so we don't want to go inside the lazy jacks. We've installed the block already at the mast, and I want to take my free end. I'm going to run it through this block. And remember, all this loose line is on the outside of the cover. You can see it here. Now the line will run back on the inside of the lazy jack lines. And when we get to the zipper again, then what we want to do is we want to tie to the zipper slider. And we want to set the tension such that this line out here on the outside hangs down so that we're happy with being able to grab it and make adjustments. So I'm going to pull a little bit more out, and that looks pretty good. Okay, we're looking at the back edge of the sail pack here with our extended zipper. And we've already put this on the boat, and we know that we want to have our line attachment helper, if you will, to open and close the zipper without having to get up on top of the boom and at the very back edge of the boom. And all boats are different, so you almost have to look at this on a case case-by-case situation. But what we determined while we were out there was that our zipper tail is really a little too long, and what was happening is that when we were at this point and then we wanted to open the zipper, this tail would invert, and then we pull it, when we want to close the zipper, instead of pulling and closing this way, the tail would invert like this, and then it would open more, and that's the end of it. So what we need to do is we need to have a way to hold this zipper tail back tightly so that all you're pulling against is the slider and you're not flipping the tail around. In our particular situation, the best way to do that is going to be to shorten the zipper slightly and move this tab forward, but move it in a manner where it's off the zipper tape enough that we can pass a leech line through the loop. So basically, think in terms of if we took this webbing off and we slid it back, leaving a passageway or a sleeve where we could pass a line through here and then tie it off to something at the end of the boom in order to hold the zipper tail back when everything is rigged. And I think a very nice way to do that is going to be to change our block that we installed on the end of the boom and add a block that has a becket, and we'll tie to the becket, and that'll hold the zipper nicely in line with the block, which should also make it easier to run the slider when we zip and unzip. The point here is that all boats are different, and you really just need to almost follow the directions to do it this way, and then if you need to come back in and make some simple alterations in order to make it perfect for your particular application, that's what you do.
Angela will take scissors and cut off the excess length of zipper. She'll then take a hot knife and seal the edge of the zipper, and then she'll take 2-inch webbing and fold it so that it has a opening in which line can be passed. And then she'll take it to the sewing machine and sew it. She's going to sew 2 rows of a straight stitch, reversing each of the rows thoroughly enough to secure the webbing on top of the zipper. The zipper is pushed back enough to allow a rope to be run through the eye of the webbing. Once that's done, we're ready to reinstall the sail pack. Here you see we used a leech line, went through the webbing, and attached it to the becket to this Harkin bullet block. And here Matt demonstrates how to open and close the sail pack with that line.
See it opening? Ready?
That's all that's required to build your very own sail pack. For the materials list, here's what's included in each one of the sail pack kits. The quantities of items in those kits are totally dependent on the size kit that you choose from the Sailrite website. And also, the tools that were used are listed here. Some of those tools are helpful, some of them are required. And also, you'll see the items for the optional zipper control line that we used for our sail pack. Your sail pack is now complete and ready to be used for your next sailing adventure. Check out our sail pack kits at Sailrite.com. They include just about everything you need to make your own sail pack. Feel free to make modifications of the sail pack to accommodate the rigging and setup of your boat. Extra or additional parts can be purchased from Sailrite. For more free videos like this, check out the Sailrite website or subscribe to the Sailrite YouTube channel today. As always, it's your loyal patronage to Sailrite that makes these free videos available. Thanks for your support.